Hey everybody, welcome to Geeky Dads. Talk about geeky things. I'm JJ Johnson, and joining me back on the show today is Andrew Swearingen. Andrew, welcome to the show, man.
Hey JJ, good to talk to you again.
All right, Andrew, I got a bone to pick with you, and I haven't told.
Oh boy.
All right, did you know I have a podcast rival?
I am aware that you have a podcast rival, yes.
Uh, okay, you're aware of this. Have
I'm
you
aware.
appeared on my podcast rival show before?
If it's the rival I'm thinking of, then yes, I do believe.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna chat about that. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, folks, if you haven't listened to the episode with me and Clint Hall, who is the host of the Experience Conversations with Creatives, last week that show aired and we talked about 1986 Transformers, or as I like to say, The Great Massacre of 1986. Have you seen that movie, man?
I actually have not. That is one of my gap movies. I was actually thinking about that as I was getting ready for this podcast. The number of movies that I haven't seen throughout the 80s that these conversations have made me kind of not brush up on. There's nothing to brush. It's just I need to get up on it and actually watch some of these. So unfortunately, that is one of those movies I've not seen.
Well, you need to check it out. Check it out. All right, folks, this episode is being brought to you by Wiccan Sarcasm Candles. For all you dads and want to go out and buy your wife a nice gift, these candles are perfect. And they have summer scents out and they have baseball scents. I am a huge baseball fan. I'm a New York Yankees fan, so I love anything when it comes to baseball. So go check them out. Use the promo code Geeky Dads at checkout and you'll get a discount. All right, so Andrew, right out of the gate, man, I got to tell you, congratulations. You are now a Realm Award finalist. Congratulations, dude.
Well, thank you. Yeah, as we're recording this, we found out. I believe it was last Sunday was when I saw the results come out, and I honestly I have this like internal clock in my head of like, okay, if I haven't heard anything about, say, a job application or a story I've submitted, I tend to assume that I assume the opposite of the old adage. I assume, well, no news probably means that bad news is coming. And so I saw that the finalists were out, and I'm like, okay, well, here, let's find out. Let's find out. And of course, my category, short audio fiction, was near the bottom. And so I had to like scroll all the way down. And there was a feeling of shock of seeing, my name there, along with Emily Grant's name, who was nominated for her story. Of course of course I didn't have it written down, but I will look it up later on so I can actually give her the proper credit, because I've listened to her story and it's really great. Emily Grant's story, and then Brian Augustin's story that is also nominated. So, and I'm not gonna let you get away scot-free here, because you are also a Realm Award finalist. Congratulations, JJ.
Oh, thank you very much. Like you said, it was kind of a shock. All three of the Iggy and Oz books have now been finalists for the Realm Award. So, I'm happy. It's always good to feel, see people recognize it, but it's still kind of a shock that you think people actually enjoy your work. So, all
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So,
Well, here, let me, because I pulled it up on my Instagram story. So Emily Grant's story, which is available on the Havoc Story podcast, is At All Costs. And then Brian Augustin's story is Of Bitter Souls, available on the Untold podcast. And then mine is called Cold Fury, also a Havoc Story podcast. All those are free to listen to. So, whether you're a one who follows the Realm Awards or not, give those a free listen. I think you'll enjoy it. And absolutely, if you want to learn more about JJ's books, buy JJ's books. Like, what are you doing? Hop on it.
I appreciate it. And we'll leave a link in the show notes for that episode and where you can go to find out more about Havoc. You know what? I need to get him on the show, Mr.
Oh,
Winch.
Andrew Winch. Yeah, yeah.
I need to get him on the show. Just come in and talk about, short fiction and Havoc and everything like that. I'm going to make that a mission. So if anybody knows Andrew Winch, tell him to come listen to this episode and then get in touch with me somehow, or I'll get in touch with him. All right,
Yeah.
so man, we're continuing. We're taking the tinfoil hat off this episode. Did you know that was one of my top rated episodes?
No, what? That-
It,
I feel like I'm breaking a little bit of kayfabe here by like acknowledging that you know the parody that existed in that episode, but no, I had no idea that that had gotten
I
so
had
much.
comments and messages on that episode than any episode I've ever done. People absolutely loved it, and it has become. It's not the top listened episode. Number one is still the top listened episode with Steve Raza, but it is now in the top five. That episode, I'm blown away.
I you know I got real nothing to say on it other than just wow, and that's hilarious to me that you know we put all these thoughts into these lists, and yet you know it's the silly chicanery of of the Tommy Westfall theorem that that really gets people's attention.
Yeah, I'm blown away. People love that episode. So I don't know, folks. We might put the tinfoil hat back on sometime. But tonight we are continuing our series in the 1980s movies. We've done 82, we've done 83, we've done 84, and tonight it is 1985. And Andrew, this was an incredible year, dude.
The oh man, I mean we say it every time, right? Like oh like but like and it's funny because the when I put my list together, I thought like, okay, you've got your hallmarks here, and the more I went down the list, it was it, each year is different, right? You know, with and this one, you know, previous years it was like, man, there's so many classics we have to leave off the list,
Yeah.
and here it was. I don't I'm not saying like bad things about some of the movies that are on our honorable mentions, but there's a lot of like maybe they wouldn't be like cultural touchstones, but there was a lot of like great, you know, movies that you would have, you know, someday just like looked at in the VHS rental store and thought, "Oh, I'll give this a shot." And then you pull out a movie like Cocoon and you're like, "Whoa, what is this? Like this movie's kind of weird, but I kind of
Yeah.
really dig it." You know, something like that. Or I'm trying to go off the top of my head here, but like I know like I mean you know, First Blood Part 2, the second Rambo film
Yeah.
is again and you know, these are honorable mentions we're talking about. There's just a lot of like really solid there's a really solid crop of films here, and even if they don't necessarily have uh the cultural legacy broadly of some of these other movies we have, you know, they're certainly a classic to somebody, and that's really cool to see.
Yeah. Now let's just go over some of the because the way we do this, folks, is we do a draft. So I had the number one pick. So I picked my movie, my number one, and Andrew picked his, and then I picked number two. And once it was taken off the list, so some of Andrew's would probably be in my top five, and some of mine would probably be in Andrew's top five. But we're getting at the what we feel is the best 10. Now there's some movies we left off here, and folks, some of you are going to turn the show off as soon as we mention this. Teen Wolf didn't make our list. The Explorers. Did you ever see that? The Explorers.
I haven't. That's one of those that I had on my list of like movies I need to watch from this era, and unfortunately I didn't get to that in the prelude process of this.
Yeah. So Commando also wasn't on our list. Saint Elmo's Fire. Weird Science, which I can't believe neither one of us got that. You already Rambo First Blood Part 2. Spies Like Us, Friday the 13th Part 5, Jewel of the Nile. Is there any others I'm missing that we just left off?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I said Cocoon, Enemy Mine, another one of those like solid fun movies that like you know like I feel like if it's one of those things like if you've seen it it really stays in your memory and you're like yeah it's like a really good episode of Star Trek that is with Dennis Quaid and Lou Gossett Jr. Not on the list. And then another one that I should see but I haven't seen but I know of its legacy is Brazil. Terry Gilliam. Apparently, it's a wild movie. Tin Hat Andrew would apparently appreciate this movie quite a bit. So,
Oh man. All right, well, let's get into this. Let's start. We're going to start with number 5 and go down to number 4. Would you like to kick us off with your number 5?
I will gleefully kick us off here. All right, so my number 5 is actually a number 4. It is Rocky 4. This is one of those movies that I feel like people either feel like you either get or you either really get it or it just kind of falls flat. I feel like there is not I don't think I've met very many people with a like a middling opinion of Rocky 4. And it is in many ways a strong departure from the previous Rocky movies, like, especially like how it starts, smaller scale, much more like a personal portrait with the first Rocky, and then it grows from there. Here it is, uh, and in the way that a series of films, it has to grow, it has to develop, it has to become something, new and greater. This changes the formula a little bit, and it what it really does is it dials everything up to 11, right? The training montages are dialed up, the melodrama is dialed up. I don't mean melodrama like negatively, it's just, I think it's an accurate descriptor of it, right? The things are painted much more broadly, the emotion is heightened, the song choice, the like the music soundtrack of this movie is dialed to I mean, you brought in James Brown, like you're not gonna that's dialing things up maximally. And that's actually a term I've heard used before, is maximalist filmmaking. I think we're all aware of like what minimalist filmmaking, and this is like, no, we are not going for subtlety here, we are going for, we've seen Rocky fight Apollo twice, we've seen him fight Clubber Lang, we saw him fight Hulk Hogan in there. Now let's see Rocky fight the Soviet Union. I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to. And for me, I can't not like this movie. I understand it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I mean, for me, the Rocky movies in general, and this one specifically, it hits a period of time when I was starting to be old enough to watch movies with my siblings. There's a pretty decent age gap between my siblings and I, and my brother loved Rocky when he was in high school. And so he would like listen to the Rocky soundtrack while we were driving into school in the mornings. He'd watch the movies. And there was a point where I started to get it. And it was like, oh, okay, okay. I was maybe like 12, 13, and maybe old enough to actually sit down and watch one of these things all the way through. And that's when I just fell in love with it. And so it's so dialed in with that, it's so interconnected with my upbringing and my early adolescence. And I really do think the movie works. It pulls on a lot of the, on a lot of the themes and a lot of the relationships you've seen building throughout these. You have a great villain with Ivan Drago. You play with all of these people who have played these characters for a long time, like Apollo Creed, like Adrian, like Rocky. And it does a lot of really cool stuff with it. And I mean, if for nothing else, the training montage of Rocky running up a mountain and screaming Drago at the top of his lungs, I mean, that's spectacular. So yeah, great movie. I will never not love that movie.
Yeah, I think this one came out obviously in 1985. We're at the height of the Cold War. So there's a lot of Cold War type themes in this story. Um, but like you said, the structure changes a little bit. It's no longer about, Rocky overcoming a champion like Clubber Lang or something like that, or Apollo Creed, because Apollo Creed, is killed within the first act. I mean, that's the inciting incident right there. And which is cool because it sets up, the new Creed movies, which I absolutely love.
Oh yeah, I love those.
And Ivan, Drago, I mean, played by Hans Dolph, I'm gonna butcher his last name, Lundgren. He also played He-Man in Masters of the Universe a couple years later, which,
Mhm.
for what it was an okay film. But I mean, it had some problems, man. But he was also in Arrow. He was the Bratva leader in Arrow season 4 or 5, I can't remember. But
Oh, okay.
yeah, he was the Bratva leader in season 4, I think it was, of Arrow. So he's done some great acting, but I mean, like you said, the training montage alone, and I get up and go run, pretty much every morning. I've listened to Rocky 4 while I've run, man. I mean, it motivates you to get up that hill. But this movie, they actually were engaging in authentic punching during this movie, and he hit Sylvester Stallone so hard that he ended up in intensive care at one point, and they had to stop shooting. I do believe that this is Sylvester Stallone's last movie he directed until like 2006 when he directed Rocky Balboa, which
Mhm, mhm.
the new one that came out many, many years later. So, I don't think Stallone directed again until that point. So he took a 20-year hiatus on directing. But it's a great movie, and like you said, I was debating on putting this at number 5 for me. It was Polly's robot that just kind of said, "Okay, I can't do this." I love the movie. Polly's robot needed to be cut out of that movie all the way around. It's still, but here's the deal about Polly's robot. That makes it so 80s. Totally right there.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it is one of those things, as you're talking about like how a franchise morphs and evolves, they have to try new things, and sometimes those new big swings work and you get some really interesting results, and sometimes you get Polly's robot, and it is what it is.
Yeah. But I think it is an excellent Cold War film, and I think it sets up Creed 2 perfectly
Oh man. I
in such a way. And I loved Creed 1, but Creed 2 is without question my favorite one.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't seen the third one yet, but I would agree. I really enjoyed. I really really loved the first Creed movie. Um, we're just gonna end up talking Rocky movies here the whole time, but Creed 2 really. I mean, and again, and it carries over the emotion from this movie, and that last fight, the way that you are seeing it from all the points of view, you're seeing it from Adonis's standpoint, you're seeing it from Rocky's point of view, you're seeing it from the father and son Dragos, and there is so much emotion packed into that, and that's the sort of thing you can do when that is a legacy sequel done well. I think when you can pull these characters back and like really get some rich texture out of that. So
Great man.
yeah, yeah. So, all right, man. Well, we've talked enough about mine. What is your number 5?
All right, my number 5 is I gotta go horror. You know me. I love 80s horror, man. And there's two reasons I put this on my list, and neither one of them really have much to do with the story. But I was as a kid growing up, I read horror. I was a big fan of Fangoria magazine. I would actually sneak it, buy it, because my mom wouldn't, buy it for me, and because it was all the special effects makeup. And I remember being in the video store one day, and if you're watching on YouTube, I'm totally gonna put this up on. I came across a film that had this cover right there. This is Fright Night. Folks, these vampires do not sparkle. All right, let's you know, I I saw that cover with that vampire, kind of the smoke of the vampire image above the house, and I absolutely fell in love with it. This is a very simple premise. You have a kid, basically, his name's Charlie, and he's obsessed with vampires, and he watches this vampire type movie show with this guy named Peter Vincent, which is played by, oh, I got the notes right here.
Is it Vincent Price?
It's based off of Vincent Price.
Okay.
Yeah, the guy's name is in the show is Peter Vincent, is played by Rodney McDowell. And so he's obsessed with vampires, and he finds out that his neighbor is basically a vampire. All right. And, but here's the reason I love this show. It's a very simple premise. Vampire lives next door. That's it. But what I love about this film is just the practical effects of what this film does. If you want to know what it was like to grow up in the 80s and watch films where they did not have CGI at that point, which is why the moon landing probably was not faked. But I just lost half my listeners. all your followers with tinfoil hats just left.
Yeah. Tin Hat Andrew just checked out completely.
But the practical effects on this film were so incredible. In fact, the artist that did this, his name was Richard Edlund, something like that. Anyway, these are the list of films that he worked on. I made a list. All right. The guy had won 2 Oscars. He worked on all the Star Wars films, Indiana Jones, the original Battlestar Galactica, Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters is what actually got him this job. Obviously, Hunt for October, Poltergeist, Die Hard, Outbreak, just all sorts of things. But I remember watching a documentary on this show because I like I said, I'm a big fan of 80s horror. So I'll watch like, how they were made. They were using these contact lenses, these hard plastic contact lenses, and they were they were painting them and then putting glitter on these contact lenses. And then the actors would put them in their eyes, and they could only have them in for 20 minutes. Otherwise, their eyes would just start getting so irritated they couldn't finish the scene. One guy actually tripped down the stairs. They had a lot of accidents while shooting this film. But, I mean, it was little things like that because when you watch this film and you watch the character's eyes, especially as a vampire or the wolves, it's amazing how they do it, and you're sitting here going, "What? How are they doing this without CGI?" And then you find out, and you're just blown away. Um, it took them over 8 hours just to prepare the makeup for, the transformation, to the vampire for the main character, which was played by Susan Sarandon's her ex-husband, I believe it was.
Mhm.
And
Prince Humperdinck himself, indeed.
yeah, yeah. And, then there was a wolf one, Evil Ed, the wolf transformation. It took them over 18 hours to prep the makeup for that scene. And when I read things like this, especially about the 80s horror, because you always hear stories about how long it took them to get Robert Englund ready for, the Freddy scenes and stuff like that. I It makes me respect the filmmakers of the 80s and how committed and how devoted they were. So when I look at Fright Night, I don't look at it mainly for uh, it's one of the greatest movies of 1985. It is a great vampire story. It's one of the best classic 80s vampire stories out there. But when you hear all the time they put in to make this film what it was, you have to respect it as just a creative artist, in my opinion. So yeah, I gotta go with Fright Night, man.
Yeah, yeah. No, well, and I've already name checked Chris Sarandon, who plays the main vampire in this, which that threw me off because, uh, it- you know, uh, up there with movies that I saw just growing up that are just intrinsically connected with my childhood is The Princess Bride,
Oh,
because yeah, as it should be with any with everybody. And to see, I mean, he's not likable in The Princess Bride. It's not like it was, not be like seeing like Mark Hamill or someone who you have like as a icon of goodness playing this, but just seeing someone who like, because I don't really know him from much else other than The Princess Bride, and seeing him in that scene, just the entire scene and how creepy and unsettling he is, it added to the creep factor for me. And I was in like my mid-20s or so the first time I saw this. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm a kid and it's like, no, I'm a grown adult and I'm still I have very odd feelings about about watching this right now. But yeah, no, I remember that. I remember just the buckets and buckets of blood and gore and green stuff and other stuff that just flowing across this, and it just absolutely one of those things you're just like, okay, this is this kind of movie. And again, not in a bad way, just like, yeah, you absolutely have to be have to respect the dedication to the special effects in a sequence like that. And
yeah.
I was actually all right, so I'm going somewhere with this, but I was listening to a podcast this week that was talking about the Muppets and how they seem more real to, when they're done well, to a viewer than, even CGI stuff that may look better or something like that. And there is something about seeing these things in a real life environment, and whether that's the prosthetic makeup and, being, having an actor behind it who can make decisions in the moment, and and having an actor who can still act with all that goop on his face. You know one of the things they would always look for in shows like Star Trek, where they have actors with lots of prosthetics, is how can you still emote with, an inch of, nylon foam on your face and fake teeth in and stuff like that. And but when you can get someone who can do it, it is very effective, as it is very effective in this movie. So yeah, yeah.
So there was one scene, and then we'll get on to your number 4. There's one scene where they were putting this, chemical compound in this guy's mouth in order to create saliva. and just so he would be drooling and things like that. Well, the actor, his name was Jeffrey. I'm drawing a blank on his full name, but he started complaining about the taste and how his mouth was getting sticky, and then they realized that they weren't putting the right chemical compound in. They were actually putting prosthetic adhesive, and it was gluing his mouth shut. So they had to pause the filming, get all the medical attention to this, get it all out of there, clean him out, wash his mouth out, and then start the scene all over again. And he just kept going, like, "Hey, I just got my mouth glued shut." I'm like, there is no way in the world this would happen in Hollywood today.
No. Yeah, credit where credit is due. The upside of doing things with a computer is that yes, you don't accidentally glue an actor's mouth shut. I feel like the Screen Actors Guild might have some some unkind opinions about such practices.
All right, man, let's get on to your number 4.
All right. Well, we will go from one practical effects feast to another. My number 4 is a movie that well, I will say what it is and then I will start talking about it. My number 4 is Legend. This is a Ridley Scott directed film. Um, Tom Cruise is in it. Mia Sara is in it. And, this is a movie that I grew up just thinking, like, oh, everyone knows this movie. And it's like, as I've been researching it, it's like, uh, I guess I'm realizing more and more, it's like to everyone, it is not inherently a classic. But it's what gets me with it is just there is I mean, like I said, it is a visual feast. Every frame of this movie, there is something great happening. The plot line, I mean, it is pretty simplistic. It is meant as as sort of it is meant as a fairy tale. It is not made as something that is going to have like this complex, study of the human psychology. It's like, no, we are going to tell a story that is the story, the struggle of light and dark, good and evil, over and over and over again through human history. But and that is certainly there, and there is certainly a lot of fun stuff to take from that. And it's fun to see Tom Cruise in a role before he was like Tom Cruise. Like Top Gun would come out the next year, and from then on, it's like any movie that Tom Cruise is in, it is a Tom Cruise movie. And here it's interesting to see the type of character he plays when he's when he doesn't when he can't throw his weight around on a set. And not he's obviously done amazing things with that since then, so I'm not saying that is a bad thing, but there are sides to him in this movie we don't see in other stuff. But if you love this movie, you love it for the sheer audacity of the practical effects. An actor I haven't mentioned yet is Tim Curry, who is he plays, his character is literally just named Darkness. And if you have not seen him, you need to Google it right now, because it is the most impressive practical effects, like devil figure I've ever seen, with these like 3-foot long horns that hang off of him. And just this incredible makeup that just is utterly seamless. He disappears into it. Talk about someone who can still act, and have all these prosthetics on. It is incredible. And it's not even the scariest thing about him in this movie. His voice, like, it is haunting. And they actually, in a very Jaws like turn of events, there was a situation where the prosthetics, like, they stuck in a bad way on his neck, and it actually ripped off like a section of skin. It was very, like, Tim Curry was in a lot of pain. And so Ridley Scott had to shoot around him for a little bit, because obviously he wanted his actor to heal, wanted to take care of him. And what happened was they shot a couple scenes without the makeup there, and it was just Tim Curry's voice. And they shot it in, they shot several scenes in such a way that it was like, oh, this is actually way more frightening when it's just Tim's voice. Um, yeah. Tim Curry is one of those very interesting actors who has done a lot of different things in his career. And I think this is probably, I mean, to me, this is one of the best things he's done in the entire thing. And to go further with this, and I didn't realize this until recently, but there is actually a director's cut of this movie that, according to both Tom Cruise and Ridley Scott, is their preferred version of the movie. The American theatrical cut is about, it's maybe like 110 minutes long. It's under 2 hours. And I think that the director's cut is closer to 2.5. They wanted to make it a longer, more expansive film that explored a lot more themes. And the studio, being the studio, said, no, we need to keep this puppy under 2 hours. But since then, both Ridley Scott and Tom Cruise have said, like, no, like, if you like this movie, go see the director's cut of it. And I want to try and track that down at some point. But yeah, this is one of those movies. Uh, just the I should have led with this part. Like, when you think of, the grim 80s fantasy movie, this is like the touchstone of that, where it is moody. There's all these creatures that are really scary and frightening. I saw this at a way too young of age. Like, I remember being like terrified by some of these critters that were running around. But that just goes to show how effective all this stuff is. So great movie. Definitely worth seeing it for the performances and for the faces that are very familiar in a unfamiliar context.
Yeah, I've only seen this film one time, and when you brought it up, I had actually forgotten about it. Oh, and I did go out and find the director's cut out there, so I'm gonna watch it.
Oh,
Just
nice.
watch it, and I was watching it was his role for this, Tim Curry, because Tim Curry's range as an actor is unbelievable. When you think of Legend, you think of Clue, you think of Home Alone, but it was this role that actually got him cast as Pennywise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, Pennywise, I think he's obviously, I think he's very well known for Pennywise because that was such a different, but people forget that he had played this part before he ever played Pennywise. And while Pennywise was creepy and had a creepy voice, I think what he did in Legend was far creepier and far more frightening, in my opinion. So I think this film was I think it was ahead of its time, and I wonder what they could do today if they had all the with CGI and everything like that. So now you don't want to say, hey, let's remake a film but you know I just curious. It amazes me what they do in during that time with the practical effects and stuff like that. It's absolutely incredible. So yeah, if folks go check this out, I'm going to actually rewatch this. It's on my list to rewatch. It's simple because you put it on your list when we were. I'm like, man, I have not seen that in years, and there's not a whole lot I remember about it other than Tim Curry. So, great movie. So, all right, my number 4, I gotta go with another horror film, folks, and I gotta go with it mainly because once again, practical effects of the '80s made this film incredible. But here's the deal: it is another George Romero film, and that is Day of the Dead. So remember, George Romero and his, I think it was his producer on Night of the Living Dead. They kind of split off and went in the two different directions. So, George Romero did Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and the other guy, I'm drawing a blank on his name. He ended up doing Night of the Living Dead too, and they were totally different films, but this is still a direct sequel to Dawn of the Dead, which was a sequel to Night of the Living Dead, and of course, Night of the Living Dead 2 is also a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. So it's an interesting concept, but this was the third film, and basically it's just a group of survivors. They're living in an underground bunker, and there's these doctors, and they're obviously studying, the zombies, the dead. And they're trying to find a cure, and they're being, there's this military group that's basically, pretty much there. Um, Captain Rhodes is the main antagonist, and he's the head military guy. You can kind of see that isolation is sort of getting to him and things like that. But I think what in this film has been remade twice already. The second time it was remade was just a couple years ago. Day of the Dead Bloodline on Netflix, about 2018 or 2019. It was okay, but for me, the two things about this. This had Greg. I'm gonna butcher his name, Nick Torero, and all my horror fans are like yelling at me right now. Anyway, this guy ended up becoming one of the best special effects guy in horror and one of the best writer and directors in horror. He is very well known for his work on The Walking Dead, especially with the episodes that introduced Negan as the main villain during that one season. And this was his first film to work on under Romero, and he worked on the practical effects. But um, one of the things I liked about this is uh, there's a hallway scene, and there's these zombie hands that are coming out of the wall. And have you seen this?
I was literally just looking up to see where I could where I could watch this, and I I think that's the image that is on the not it's not IMDb. What is it? The Just Watch app. I
Yeah.
think that's all the wall hands coming out of the wall.
So it's a dream sequence right there, and
Yeah, that one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So she's having a dream sequence. The zombie arms are coming out of the wall, and the entire thing fell on her right in the middle of the shoot. And they had to rebuild the entire thing and end up, reshooting the film. And so they had a very low budget. And Romero was like, there was a lot of problems with the production company. They wanted to cut his budget in half. He didn't want to do that. But practical effects, a lot of it was they were building the effects in this guy's basement and then just bringing them to the set. And you know, I think they were using things like pig's guts and stuff like that when they. But here's the cool thing: the extras. They needed extras, and they didn't have any money. All right, so they paid the extras $1. They gave them a hat that said, "I was a zombie in Day of the Dead." They got a ticket to the premiere. And then they got a fake newspaper that basically said, you know, the dead have risen and stuff like that was the main headline. So it was like, these three little collector's items, and people still have these.
Hmm.
So, there's one guy out there and it says he's got a collection of all the zombie stuff. And he's like, yeah, my dad was a extra in, Day of the Dead and things like that. I've always enjoyed Romero's work. If you go back and listen to my episode on zombies with Randy Strew, this movie was on there. Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, both phenomenal films. I think Romero was very, very ahead of his time, especially when it comes to sort of, I don't want to say just looking at society and thinking about societal themes and things like that. I think that he picked up a lot of interpreted a lot of different things going on in society and put them into his films. And he always did that in a very, very good way. So Day of the Dead, I rewatched this probably about a month and a half ago, and it still sticks with me as one of the best zombie films out there. So I gotta go with Day of the Dead.
All right. So I'm going to pick your brain here for a second because I have only seen the original Night of the Living Dead. Of I guess I saw the remake of Day of the Dead. I think that was Zack Snyder directed it in '04.
Yeah,
So
I over Romero's actually. I know a lot of people are gonna shoot me for saying
so so one quick question. So is it necessary to see these movies in sequence if you go like Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day, or can you just like pick and choose, you know,
no, because they're set in different locations. Day of the Dead or Dawn of the Dead is set with them all, and Day of the Dead is a completely different group over here to the side in Florida in a bunker. You don't need to see them all. Night of the
okay.
Living Dead, you can watch them in any order.
Okay, okay. So not a lot of connective tissue there, much like zombies themselves. Gotcha.
Right. Yeah.
I gotcha. I gotcha.
All right. So what's your number three?
Yeah. All right. So number three, my four and five were kind of big visual feasts and high drama sorts of things. This movie for my number three is very spare. It strips a lot of things down. It is very plain, as a certain group of people would say. My number three is Witness. This is a movie with Harrison Ford and Kelly McGillis, which I did not realize was Kelly McGillis until I saw it, and I rewatched it before we did this, and I was like, "Oh, Kelly McGillis from Top Gun!" Like, would not have pegged her as playing the Amish widow in this movie, um, but I I have always enjoyed I've always enjoyed Harrison Ford's non indie and Star Wars projects. I think because like his face and his voice is um, such a hallmark of Americana in a lot of ways. It's like just any chance to see Harrison Ford acting in a movie, you know, uh, up until a certain point. I will say, like, somewhere around the 2000s. I don't know. I That's a longer conversation, but I have not loved all of his performances of late. But in the 80s and 90s, like, just is just peak Harrison Ford, and this is right there in the middle of it. I think this is right off the heels of Temple of Doom. Star Wars is finished, and it's like you really get to see him just act. This is his only Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, which I think is a shame. Um, and it's like you take away all the things that you think you love about the movies that Harrison Ford is in. You take away the speculative elements, you take away the squashbuckling, the adventure, and you just make him a cop in a movie where he is protecting an Amish boy who witnessed a crime, and you just let that story unfold. And it is such a it is such a lean movie. Like, like when I was talking about minimalist film earlier, this is the apex of minimalist film. Like, it is the performances are all really toned, like, not toned down. That could sound like I'm implying that it's boring. It's just, it is very, there is so much that is under the surface in this movie, but there is so much that's happening. The tension, the romance, the suspense is like boiling, because it's such a great, well written script, and it's so well put together. There's so many great scenes where there is just not talking. It is just, you are just letting Harrison Ford and Kelly McGillis just act and express and emote, and it is so captivating. It is so great. Um, I am grateful for any of the Harrison Ford films that we get, but it does make me wish a little bit that he'd had a chance to do more of these things. I think these are the things that he finds. I say finds present tense, because I still think he finds these things much more interesting than Han Solo. I mean, he wanted Han Solo to be killed off in Return of the Jedi, and they finally gave him his wish, some 30 years later in The Force Awakens. I think he finds this is the stuff that he really enjoys um, performing in, and it's such a great story too. Like, it's such a great simple story, but it's like, I, I don't know. I'm struggling for a metaphor for it, JJ. But like, if I just think of, like, in the way that, like, a sorry, because it's the Amish, my brain is only coming up with wood analogies. Also, because Harrison Ford multiple times makes the joke about being a carpenter, and I can't help but think of the story of him being a carpenter for George Lucas while they were casting Star Wars, and that's part of how he got the audition. Um, but I picture like a perfectly carved wooden sphere, and the way that it is just so simple, but so pleasing to look at and feel and touch. And it's such a great movie. I think anybody who is a fan of Harrison Ford needs to see it, because it's kind of forgotten now in the midst, the other things that have lasted longer. But this is, like I said, this is, Return of the Jedi was 83, Temple of Doom was 84, this is 85. It is right in the heyday of Harrison Ford, just at the height of his acting powers. And you get to see all the things that he does well. You get to see him, kick some butt. He knocks some bad guys around. You get to see him be funny. In a couple of different instances, you get to see him, do like an intense Harrison Ford stare at the camera, and and yeah, there is just so much to love about this movie. It is a movie to, like, put your phone down and just sit down and watch a master engage in his craft so superbly. Um, yeah, great film. I cannot say enough about it. I wish I could rank it higher, but it's um, yeah. The other films we have are just also great. So this is a one that is well worth revisiting.
Yeah, this film's a little it's kinda got that noir crime type, pacing to it in a way that I thinks works very, very well.
Sorry, I'm laughing because you said noir, and the first thing that came to mind was Amish noir, and I was like, I like, I feel like I
You know,
don't know, I
we need a
don't know.
writer to go write some Amish noir.
Man, I mean, you've had Carrie Neats on this podcast, man. Get him on it.
Empires in Space, Amish noir in space. Maybe Carrie can do that for us.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. This is, because, he did Regarding Henry too, which was another one of these type of films that was sort
Mm,
of that modern love story with a lot of crime drama in it and things like that. A role he always got, I always liked him in was the Jack Ryan roles. But this,
mhm.
like you said, it's a very slow paced film. But I think it was one of those films that, he had done Indiana Jones, he had done, the Star Wars films. This was him sort of saying, look, guys, I can act. And I'm gonna go out here and put this movie out. The Last Crusade obviously hadn't come out yet. And he it's an incredible role. Like you said, it's the only Academy Award nomination he got. And it wasn't just him. This film was nominated for a couple of other awards too, but it was a very, very good film. But like you said, it's a different role, and I think this is one of those films that made a lot of people just like start to respect Harrison Ford just a little bit more as an actor because he's not just the adventure type role that we had been seeing. He's actually a serious actor. And so yeah, it's a great film. I haven't seen it in many years. It's probably college last time I saw it, but it's really good. It's deserving to be up there. So I had a great film, man.
Yeah, and just a couple other footnotes on it. Obviously, Danny Glover is also in this movie as one
Oh
of
yeah.
the cops, but like I didn't notice it the first 2 times I saw this, and then someone pointed out that Viggo Mortensen is in this movie, and now, I can't not see him every scene he's in. I don't think he has any speaking lines, but he's one of the background Amish that you see, in there, and I don't know, I'm just gonna gush a little bit more on it, and just the fact that, we've talked sometimes about movies that, I feel like this is a movie that, I mean, it already struggled to get made in the 80s, right? I mean, it's very rural, it's very low key. It was a struggle to get it made, and it had Harrison Ford attached to it. I don't see a way that you get this movie made today. You might get like a limited series made out of it, like a 6 episode or 8 episode thing. I'm not sure you could tell this story better by stretching it out over 8 episodes. I think this is the perfect length to tell this story, and I love. I don't want to say I don't want to say ambiguity with it, but I love that it explores these ideas of, people from different worlds. Can they find love? It
Yeah.
explores pacifism versus violence, and a movie today, it would come down really hard one way or the other, right? It would say like, oh, violence is not the way, or it would say like, or it would say like, oh, religious orthodoxy only traps people or something like that. And it presents both worlds. It presents the up and, the pros and cons of either way, and it doesn't really leave you with like, it doesn't explain it to you. I think that's another great thing that it does. It brings these thoughts up and makes you think about them. It doesn't tell you what to think about them. Yeah, I could keep going. I watched it this morning, that's when I watch my movies. I get up at 4:30 in the morning, and if I don't have writing to do, then that's when I'll carve through, a good Harrison Ford movie like that. So it's very fresh on my brain. But great, great, great movie. Needs to get more love than it does. So yeah,
Cool.
let's hop onto your 3 here.
All right, my number three. I actually ended up switching my number three and two, but
Ooh.
is actually Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. I grew up with, my father who is a huge post-apocalyptic fan. He was a huge fan of, in the 80s, men's adventure stories, novels were like huge. And there was one called The Deathlands. And the Deathlands really reminded me of the Mad Max films. The Mad Max films, this was the third one in the series. And I think for me, it was just, one thing I always liked about the Mad Max films, especially, is Max really isn't really the protagonist in these stories. He's obviously the main character, but he just sorts of shows up and it's other people who have a goal. And he's always helping other people with their goals. You see that in Mad Max Fury Road. Uh, yeah, that's a huge part in it. The main character and the protagonists aren't the same individual, same characters, and I think that's true here because Max shows up and basically, um, it's this place called, I'm drawing a blank, Bartertown, basically, is,
Bartertown.
and it's ran by Auntie, and then there's a there's a lower level sort of, I think it's just called the Underworld, and it's ran by Master, who is basically a dwarf, and he rides around on a giant named Blaster, who's his bodyguard. And I think they're using like pig feces or something like that to create to refine some some sort of resource. I can't remember if it's what it is, if it's energy or something. But basically, Auntie wants Max to kill, you know, the giant, uh, which is the giant's name is Master Blaster or something like that.
Yeah, well, it's Master Blaster, and Master is the dwarf, and Blaster is the the giant
Yeah,
creature thing.
Blaster's the door is the giant, and so Thunderdome, the Thunderdome, basically, this is like the Hunger Games and post-apocalyptic. It is, what is it? Two men enter, one man leaves, and that. And it is just it's got that punk rock type feel to it. As a kid watching this, and of course I didn't see it till like 87 or 88. I was like 10 or 11 when I watched it. And of course I watched it on cable television. It was one of those TNT type, movies we were watching. But my dad was just glued to the TV because he loved the Mad Max films. And of course they were the first post-apocalyptic type stories I ever got to watch. And it just made you think about, there's some great themes in here, but I was always drawn to Max's character simply because Max would always go out of his way to just help strangers in need and who needed help. He wasn't the most pleasant, uh, you know, main character, I guess you could say, but he always had that duty where he just wrestled with morals and ethics and things like that. And I think that's what these films really sort of shown him anyway. So I gotta go with Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
Yeah, yeah. My dad loved this movie too. I just I don't know when he would have first. I would imagine he saw it when it came out, but I remember it was one of those like that he would like reference a lot, like two men enter, one man leave, and uh, yeah, yeah, just all of the things about it. And it was one that I specifically remember sitting down and watching this one with him. I actually, we were talking about with the Romero movies, like, do you need to see them in order? This is one of those fun trilogies that I saw in reverse order. I saw Thunderdome sitting down with my dad. I might have been early high school age or so. I finally saw Road Warrior when I was in college, and then I only a couple years ago actually saw the original and then I saw Fury Road when it came out as well. Awesome movie. And then I only saw the original Mad Max, like, I don't know, it was one of those things that was like, it was on Hulu and it was about to expire, and I was like, I've never seen the original Mad Max. I need to jump on it and watch this. But yeah, it is such a great dad movie. I feel like there is something about it. And it just, yeah, interesting seeing how they do a post-apocalyptic world, the way that they do it in a time when, again, that wasn't a super popular genre. Now we've seen any number of dozens of post-apocalyptic settings and stuff like that. But how they do that, how they do that with practical effects, how they do that, I'm sure, with not an amazing budget. these Mad Max movies really are something, because I remember Roger Ebert, he wrote a review about, it was about Thunderdome, and it was like, this isn't how sequels are supposed to work. Like, they're not supposed to get bigger, but also get better and more impressive with each one. Like, usually you have the really good opening act to the first movie, and then you try and, each one kind of tries to be derivative, and maybe you get a really solid, sequel, a number two movie, but usually by number three the gas starts to run out. And it's like, here it's like reverse depreciation, where like each time you kind of rebuild it and make it even better and better and better. And uh yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. This is a great fun movie. If you know what you are getting into with it, it's a fun ride.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what someone just like you. Well, I guess I kind of had that experience of just being dropped into, the world of Mad Max, and it's like, all right, have fun, ride this wave.
All right, man. What's your number two?
All right, number two, we are getting into some bona fide 80s classics here. I
Oh yeah.
had to I had to skip a John Hughes movie on my last list. I'm not doing it on this one, because this, I think, is peak John Hughes, and that is The Breakfast Club. Um, this is about as close to like a Brat Pack Avengers movie as you can really get, because you've got Molly Ringwald, you've got Anthony Michael Hall. How did I blank on his name? You've got Emilio, yeah, Emilio Estevez.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely, man.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I was for a second. I was like, no, it's Martin Sheen. That's just because he looks so much like his dad in this movie. Like young Emilio Estevez looks freakishly like Martin Sheen does in Apocalypse Now. Ali Sheedy, who does a bunch of amazing '80s movies. You've just got so much that's work. And Judd Nelson. I honestly, I don't know what else from like the Brat Pack era he's famous for. I mainly knew him growing up from the sitcom Suddenly Susan. I don't know what else he's been in besides that. So my apologies for my gap in my knowledge with that. But this is one of those, just like, everyone who has been to high school is, can identify with one of these people, and realistically we can all identify with facets of all of them. Like, we all have the sort of emotionally insecure side, like Anthony Michael Hall's character. We have the sort of, every guy especially has had moments of like the tough false bravado, like you see from Emilio Estevez and from Judd Nelson in this. And we all, and I don't know from the gal side, but I feel like a lot of women as they were growing up went through the, if you look at just the visuals of Ali Sheedy and Molly Ringwald, you have that duality of like, I hate, wanting to look, glammed up and dolled up and stuff like that, and then also like, I hate the world and I'm just going to sit here and wear black all day. Like, it's and also just the understanding of, the way that you see the grown-ups in this movie, which I'm not normally a fan of the trope of, oh, just parents don't understand, grown-ups don't understand. It's like, well, kids are dumb too. But there is an interesting moment that I think every person goes through as they're growing up, when you realize like, oh, like the grown-ups are just people. Like,
Yeah.
they have their own crud that they're dealing with. Um, and they have their own problems and their own faults. And some, it's at one point or another, sooner or later, there's this realization. The image that is embedded in my brain is like the one teacher. I cannot remember his name, but he's the one who's like staring at Judd Nelson and just looking at him like, come on, hit me, hit me, hit me. And it's like, what is happening right now? And this is a guy who is clearly suppressed and not worked through some pretty intense stuff, and he's taking it out on these kids here. Yeah, just the cathartic moments that happen in this, as these group of kids from all these different walks of life, they find commonality, they find common ground, and figuring out what they have in common more, and they share and they kind of heal all together. It's really, it's, in the way of a good John Hughes movie, it is irreverent at times, it is heartfelt at times, it is goofy at times, it is depressing at times. He finds such a good way to mix all these great things together. I mean, like I said, I don't think that, I guess you could say you could make the argument about Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but it's like I don't know that John Hughes. I don't know that the John Hughes. I'm realizing I'm maybe overstepping there. I'm not 100% certain in my brain if John Hughes directed Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but I don't think John Hughes did it better in terms of a written and directed by project than he did with this one.
Yeah, I was actually looking this up just now because I wanted to confirm it. This had a $1 million budget. All right. This was filmed in Maine North High School in Illinois. I forget the name of the town in Illinois. But this is the same high school that they used for Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Hold on. To save money, they shot this concurrently. Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Breakfast Club. They shot them at the same time because they only had the high school for a certain period of time. So they were shooting. And so when you watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and this is what I was looking up to confirm, you will actually see some of the set crews in for the Breakfast Club in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So they shot these at the exact same time. But this isn't my favorite John Hughes film. The Great Outdoors is definitely my favorite John Hughes film. But one of the things that I liked about this film, and I've heard that there was a director's cut, but nobody's ever seen it. Like his widow mentioned that there was a director's cut. But this film just deals with the struggle of what it means to be a teenager.
Mm.
And that struggle is just as true today as it was in the 80s. In fact, I think the themes that this talks about, I made a list, it's the struggle to be understood as a teenager. Hello. If Instagram and Snapchat and social media and all that stuff isn't putting that out there even greater today, I don't know what else. This talks about peer pressure. It talks about stereotyping. And here's the biggest one, the one that never changed. Parental expectations that a teenager feels they have to live up to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that John Hughes, we talk about this being the Brat Pack, but you have Emilio Estevez's character, and he is trying so hard to be impressive to impress his dad. You have the kid that's just he's a drug addict or whatever, and his home life stinks, and he doesn't want to talk about it. You have the weird girl that just kind of keeps quiet. I mean, it hits every single one, and at the end of the day, they realize they're all a lot more alike than they are different. And I think what that does is that just shows the show that we all may come from different backgrounds. This film, in my opinion, I was going to put it on my list if you didn't take it. Obviously, you took it, so I'm excited that we get to discuss it. I mean, it's a $1 million budget, and we're still talking about it today. That is a film, I think, that stands the test of time without question. It's The Breakfast Club. I rewatched it I think it was February. I rewatched it, and it holds up just as much today. And I think it's phenomenal to be on this list, man. So yeah, great choice.
Yep. All right, man. We'll square up here. What's your number dose?
Okay, my number dose. I have to go with another Tim Curry one, a different role than Legend, obviously, but I gotta go with Clue, man. This film, it was written by John Landis, okay, he wrote a lot of great films. He wrote Blues Brothers, he wrote Animal House, American Werewolf in London, and he also wrote Thriller. All right. The guy, he wrote a great script. But when I think of games, like board games being turned into movies, I think this film nailed it in so many ways because the entire point of Clue was, okay, who did it? Where did they do it at? And what weapon did they do it at? And, we all have seen it in like, obviously home. So we see the 3 endings. But when they released it in theaters, each theater was getting a different ending. So some people would go to this theater and they'd find out, oh, wait a minute. I got a different ending than you got because you went to this theater. And then so somebody and they did it in a way to try and get people to keep going back and rewatching it, just so they could see the other ending. But the problem was it 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 didn't do that well in the box office. It was like a $15 million budget. I don't even think it met its budget at the box office. It didn't really become popular until it got started getting out there on home television and stuff like that, cable TV and things. But I still think it's a great movie. We actually introduced our kids to it not too long ago, just, as a fun Friday night film, because we were playing Clue, and, we're like, "Hey, you gotta watch the Clue movie," and, we all see the 3 endings, but, man, if I grown up then and I'd been like a teenager or an adult, I would've totally been going to every theater I could to find a different ending because that's just how dorky I am about that. But I gotta go with Clue. I think this was a great role for Tim Curry. I think this is more the role we're used to, sort of that comedic type role. But there's something about this. Obviously, Ryan Johnson says this was a big inspiration for him when he wrote Knives Out. Number one, I'm more partial to one than I am two. I like two, but I'm still more partial to one. But you know, I think Clue is one of those that just sticks with people. So I gotta go Clue, man.
Oh yeah, no, this is I think I've talked about comedies before, and like part one of the metrics with which I grade a comedy is its quotability. And holy cow, is this a quotable movie? Like it, yeah, it's one of those like as soon as you've like seen it, you just they're just ingrained in your heads. Like the one where they're like counting the number of shots, or yo no meaning yes, no no meaning no, and flames, flames on the side of my and the performances are so unhinged, like
Y-
it in a way that like it's not just utter madness where it's like random, but it's like there's this rigid structure that you're following because you're following the mechanics of the game, you're following the steps of like a who done it story, and then you just have these moments of utter madness as people are just losing their minds. It is yeah, it is one of the best comedies I think I've ever seen. I think if I had to rate like personal favorite comedies, easily top five. And yeah, I mean Tim Curry is pitch perfect with this, where he gets to put off his creeper vibes. I mean that in the most positive of ways. And yet he is still charming and witty and funny. Like this is, I think this is really peak Tim Curry in a lot. Uh, Actually, yeah. I was saying this about Harrison Ford earlier. How you see him using all of his skills in Witness. You see Tim Curry doing all the great Tim Curry things in this movie because you see him be villainous. You see him being like deceptively charming. You see him being, side-handed, and you see him being funny and, witty and all of that stuff. Yeah, yeah. No, great film. Yeah, superb.
Yeah, I love it. It's one of those I can rewatch. So, all right, man, let's get to because we're starting to run out of time. Let's get
Yep, yep.
next two, and we are down to number one movies for us in 1985. What is yours, dude?
All right, my number one. I mean, in so many ways, it's just the perfect quintessential '80s movie. It is Back to the Future. This is one of those movies that is just to turn a phrase here, it is timeless.
Yep.
It is one of the hallmarks of the '80s. It does. I was thinking about this because I always have regarded this as like the quintessential '80s movie, and it's like, well, what is it? Because it doesn't even spend a majority of the runtime in the '80s. It's mostly in the '50s. And I think it's the fact that you have a coming of age story, which is obviously a big part of '80s pop culture in the movies. You have speculative, you have time travel, you have science fiction, which again is something that is really, like that wave is starting to crest following the success of Star Wars. You've got some amazing stars. This is Michael J. Fox's other big hit of this year, along with Teen Wolf. You have performances that that last, that stand the test of time. I mean, Doc Brown was an immediately iconic character that like everyone could identify with. Everybody, could understand what this character is about. And the script is just flawless. This is one of those screenplays that people use as a like this is how you write a really perfect movie where everything connects back to itself. All the wheels are turning. Everything is explained. Everything makes sense. Everything that you set up is paid off later on. Um, and it is so perfect. It hits on all the right notes. I mean, it is an instant classic, and it's just so much fun that like I really feel like you could show this to audiences today who, if there had not been someone who had seen it before, and like the things that, there may be special effects that are more or less dated, but everything that is in it is working like so superbly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's one of those films I absolutely think, you know, it talks to us about the consequences of messing with the past. It talks to us about, and what I think makes it 80s is because, we were growing up in a period that, there was a lot of unknowns, but people were starting to actually question, what if I had done this differently back then? What if, back in the, that greatest generation group didn't care about that stuff. They were just they were just happy to get out of the war alive and have a career. The boomers during this time, I don't want to put pressure on boomers, but the reality is boomers and the Gen Xers, we were starting to question. Yeah, they questioned they were the first generation to really question the past in a way, and so I think it sort of touched on that aspect of society. But like you said, it allowed you to suspend disbelief too. That was another thing because
Mm.
when you think about Doc Brown and his ideas of time travel and how it all works and all this stuff, there's a lot of holes you could probably poke into his concept of time travel, but you suspended that disbelief and continued to just go with it because the script was so well structured and it hit the beats perfectly every stinking time. And it's one of those that, like you said, when you study screenwriting, when you study storytelling, you go back to this film because it is a coming of age story, but it's a coming of age stories that goes backwards in order to come forwards. And I think that's absolutely great. There's so many quotable lines in this. Um, it's one of those movies that you can keep coming back to and you feel like you're just sitting down with an old friend. And like I said, it's one of those that is on my list to introduce my kids to. We have not done that yet. But we should do an episode sometime. The 10 movies we want our kids to watch, and just, these are the things they need to watch one day. Of course, we'll do that after the 1980 series, which we've been doing that for like 9 months now. We're only halfway through the 80s, but it's a great film. It's would go on both of our list and so many other people's lists because I mean it's Michael J. Fox. It's his breakout year. Great film, man.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I had my one out there. Let's throw out your number one. Share it with the world.
All right, here we go. Hey, you guys. Come on, man. You got to go with Goonies. Goonies is to me what it means to be a kid in the 80s. Absolutely. There are some of those movies that just show what it means to be a little kid in the 80s. E.T. did it, but I think Goonies really did it too. This is also sort of that coming of age story. I mean, it's a basic plot. They're about to lose their home. It's being bought out by these rich entitled people, and they go on an adventure to look for One-Eyed Willie's gold, and that's basically the story. In the process, they're being pursued by this family that is trying to that's doing some bad things. They've committed crime. They've killed an FBI agent. I mean, it is just one of those films that just what it means to go on an adventure with your friends. And as an 80s kid, we would do this. We'd just get out and head out. And the rule was be home by the time the street lights came on. That was our rule. I mean, I can't imagine letting my kids go out and just say, hey, be home by the time the street light comes on, but that's how we did it as a kid. And that was grandma's rule. But this film was written by, Chris Columbus,
Mhm.
who also wrote Home Alone. I have a list here actually. I
He
should look.
directed the first 2 Home Alone movies, the first 2 Harry Potter movies,
Yes.
which are like yeah, I'm a huge Chris Columbus fan, so yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Christy Jackson, Pixels. He did. Oh, Mrs. Doubtfire too.
Oh, that is one of his, I forgot about
Yeah,
that.
Doubtfire. So Chris Columbus, John Hughes, those guys, man, they were always hitting it out of the park. But yeah, the first two Harry Potter films were done by him as well.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm, yeah,
but
yeah.
this film had, I mean, it had a young Sean Austin. All right, I mean, it had a young Josh Brolin. This is long before Thanos, man. It had a Corey Feldman and Ke Hu Kwan. Did I say that right? Who, by the way, just won his first Oscar, man.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
Short Round is in this film as Data, two of the most iconic kid roles this guy played. And today, this year, he is winning an Academy Award. Folks, if that doesn't tell you to stick with what you love, that right there is an inspirational story, in my opinion.
Yeah,
But I mean,
yeah.
Goonies, to me, this is what it means to be an 80s kid. And that's the reason I love it. It was shot on location in Oregon. There was obviously some scenes that were shot. I think the scenes with One Eye Willie's ship and the water slide scene and all that stuff. I think that was shot on in Hollywood, but on one of the big stages. But for the most part, I mean, it was shot right there on location. It's a great film, and I mean, it's one of those I could rewatch it over and over and over and over and never grow. It's like Back to the Future. You just never get tired of watching this. So I got to go with Goonies. I think it's one of the best 80s 1985 films. And
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I'll keep my points brief on this because I know we're bumping up against the clock here. But yeah, this is, I mean, it's such a perfect, like, I don't think this movie ever expires in your mind, because you either love it because you're watching it and you're a kid, or you watch it and you love remembering what it was like to be a kid. I watched this movie in my best one of my best friend growing up's basement, and we just watched it and just laughed our heads off at every part of this. Yeah, there's so much power that's going into this movie that creates for this really wholesome, innocent. I love the micro genre of kids on bikes. That's just, that's Harry. That's yeah, that's this movie. That's ET. That's, just anytime when kids are off going on an adventure. Stand by Me, that sort of a thing.
oh,
Yeah, you've got Chris Columbus writing. You've got Richard Donner directing. I believe Steven Spielberg was a producer on this. There's so much that's working to make a great, fun, innocent adventure. And yeah, it's so great. This is definitely one of them. Excepting for a couple of cuss words, it's definitely on the list of movies I want to share with my son when he's old enough.
well, and it's instantly quotable. I mean,
Mhm.
it's their time up there. It's our time down here. I mean, you got the hey, you guys. You got Pincher's a pal. It's my mom's favorite piece, and do the truffle shuffle. I mean, it's I mean, there's so many lines in this film that you just step back and think of and just say, "Man, I know what that line is from. It's from Goonies." And I think it's a great film, and like you said, it just other than a few cuss words here and there, it's one of those films that everybody our age wants their kids to end up seeing. Like my grandmother wanted me to watch the film she grew up watching that she loved, the film like The Wizard of Oz or a lot of the John Wayne westerns and stuff like that, or To Kill a Mockingbird. Then there's the films we want our kids to grow up watching, and it's Goonies, and it's Back to the Future, and it's Indiana Jones and those stuff. So I gotta give it up, Goonies, Back to the Future, both of them number ones in my opinion. So all right, Andrew, it has been great having you back on the show again. Folks, we're going to leave a link to Andrew's short audio story that is now a finalist for the Realm Awards. Go check that out and listen to it. You won't be sorry. It's what's his name that narrated that? What's
Magnus Carlsen. I was actually just thinking. I realized I did not give him a proper shout out at the top of the show. But Magnus is such a great voice artist. Like anything you listen to on the Havoc Story podcast is great. And yeah, his
yeah.
voice is a powerful force.
And Emily Hendricks just did her Kickstarter for her new book that's coming out.
Yeah.
She raised over $10,000. Man, unbelievable! And he is going to be one of the two narrators on that as well. So, folks, go check that out. We'll leave that link in the show notes. Hey, everybody, this has been Andrew and JJ, and this has been Geeky Dads. Talk about geeky things, folks. That is a wrap.